Daniel Jeremiah, Brian Baldinger, Dan Orlovsky, a trio of guests that have been on Brock and Salk, all of whom said Kubiak would be a really solid choice, an interesting choice, because Klint Kubiak is your new Seahawks OC. Bump, he was your front runner. How do you feel about the news?
I feel good about it. I think that when you look at the options, you got the young man, Udinski, is that his name, from Minnesota. I just wouldn't want to put him in this situation, a win-right-now situation with a veteran quarterback. We'll see if DK is going to be here, Tyler Lockett. There's just, this team is almost ready to compete for a conference championship, I think. I think they're a few pieces away, right? You got to start with the playoffs. I think they're a couple years away. But the trajectory is going in the right direction. I think a young man has some things to learn. Then we look at Hank Fraley was the name that was connected to this team. The question with him was he's never called plays before, which I understand at some point an OC is going to get the nod who's never called plays before. I just don't want to go through those bumps in the road with a guy who hasn't called it before.
Your head coach, too.
Yeah. And then you have Kubiak, right? And the reason why I liked him is because he's been there, he's done that. You can look at his numbers with the New Orleans Saints last year and be alarmed and say, well, why are they picking this guy? Look at these numbers. Forget the numbers. The numbers play tricks on you sometimes. Watch the film. And the reason why I like what I saw on film, a fullback was used. You got jet sweep. Off the jet sweep, you got split zone, you have boot. You have offsets. You're in shotgun, you're under center. You got wide zone, you got split zone. There's a quick game. There's double tight ends. There's shift. There's toss. There's dropbacks. There's power. There's trap. It's a multiple type of offense. And I think Geno will benefit from being under center a lot more than he was last year. Last year, he was hardly under center. And he's got a history. Started at Texas A&M with the Minnesota Vikings, went to the Denver Broncos, was with the San Francisco 49ers, and then the Saints. I think that this offense is in a place in development to where a mature, experienced offensive coordinator will benefit the most rather than a young man who can be great, not knocking a young man, who can be great, or an offensive line guy who's just never done it before. If you're talking about like startups, this ain't a startup. This organization is not a startup, right? It's almost like we've been in business for a couple years. I know it's been 1 year with McDonald, but the feeling is things have been moving a bit. You need an experienced president or manager to come in and kind of make sure your processes are on point.
The three questions every Seahawks fan probably had or has about Klint Kubiak were just answered by you. Number one, does he have play calling experience? What can you tell me about the team he was on last year? Number 2 and 3 are both answered in part by Mike Haas, Saints play-by-play man, who was on with us a couple weeks ago. First, it would be, okay, well, tell me about how much he leans into the run, right? We're all assuming that philosophically that might have been a disagreement between Ryan Grubb and Mike McDonald. And also, why did his offense fall off? Again, both answers here.
To do this offense well, you've got to be able to run the football on first and second down to some degree of positivity. And the Saints did so early, and then they couldn't do it. You couldn't run the ball, and then it's a pass-first situation with that patchwork offensive line. I think the offense system itself became kind of a grab bag because you had to do it with the skill set that you had.
Very much leans into the run, central to getting started, particularly on early downs. When you can't do it, you run into problems. And the Saints ran into problems because of injuries up front and also to key position players, skill players.
Yeah, you got to be able to run the football. The Chiefs ran for 135 yards. You got the Bills running for 147. You look at, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'm sure the Commanders rushed for around 100 yards. Like every team established the run to open things up. We talk about the shift that football has. It goes in phases, right? Every about 10 years, something changes in football, personnel, scheme, and all that stuff. But what is always true is that you must establish the run. And I think that will be an emphasis here with Kubiak. My question with Grubb is I wonder why he didn't lean into it more, right? Because there's always reasons for things. You could disagree with how he did things, agree with how he did things, but there are always reasons for it. Now, I wish I could sit down and just talk to Grubb and ask him, okay, why didn't you lean into the run like you said you were going to do? Was it personnel? Was it being down? Was it your guard situation? Did you think Geno was your best option? Those would be my questions, but watching the film with at Kubiak, or excuse me, watching film of Kubiak when he was over there with the Saints, he clearly wants to run the football.
What does he need to succeed here?
Offensive line play, offensive line development. You're not going to go out this offseason and get 5 new guys on the line. You don't need 5 new guys. You got some ends or some tackles that are good to go. I think Olu's good to go. You got to focus on those guard spots. So what do you need? You need development by these young guys, and you need a veteran to come in and take hold it the same. Like when Dwayne Brown came through, like a few years ago, right? What, 2016 or something like that, 17, 18?
I think so.
When Dwayne Brown came, it just felt different. You have that veteran, that offensive line, that all-pro, Pro Bowl type of dude to kind of lead. It all starts there. So we're going to see how they attack this offseason. We're going to see what they do with that 18th pick in the draft. But he needs an offensive line. You need to develop. You need to draft.
This is going to sound like a repeat, but a question from a listener says, what does it say about the future run game? He seems very pass-oriented as a coordinator. You already answered that you think the run is going to be pivotal to what he wants to do. But let's go to the kind of the weaknesses of his offense, because we heard it from Daniel Jeremiah. We heard a little bit of it from Mike Haas. When you don't have the run, you run into trouble.
When you don't have the illusion of running the football, you are in trouble. And that's true. But that happens with every team. If you are down 10 points in the fourth quarter with 6 minutes to go, or 10-plus points with 6 minutes to go, chances are you are going to throw the football. The illusion of the run is gone for most teams. That's when you have to lean on your quarterback a bit. That's when Geno comes into play. And I think that's where people might have some concern, because he has turned the football over a lot. But, yeah, you're absolutely right. There are weaknesses in every offense. You can always poke a hole and find a weakness in offense. And in this offense, that's absolutely true. If you can't run the football, then you can't set everything else up, because that's how Kubiak and O'Connell and McVay and all these guys who run similar offenses open up the game.
Someone said, can you really run into trouble if you can't run? Yes, it was an intentional play on words on my part. Someone said he ran only 3% more than the Seahawks did and had a better offensive line. What's he going to do with this trash heap? First of all, I think the Seahawks will and should address the offensive line with pick number 18 overall. If not, maybe they trade back and address it with whatever their first pick becomes. But the Saints had some key injuries offensively.
Yeah,
and so
early.
This is how I feel in general about Kubiak. I don't know a lot about, as a non-former player, I'm limited in the things I can understand about X's and O's, like truly understand. So instead, I just use general context clues, historical clues in context to evaluate a hire. And the way I look at it is, you're not going to get a lateral move. And you're certainly not going to get a demotion. So it's rare that you're going to get an existing OC that's well established to become your OC.
Yeah.
Especially when you're not a playoff team. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So what do you have from a pile of unproven people or people with questions? And they felt that this was the best from that group.
You're only as good as your options. Ben Johnson wasn't coming over here. I mean, do you want Slowick right now? He's not looking too hot. You're only as good as your options. So you can make an argument. You're never going to have a hire unless you are the Chicago Bears looking at a Ben Johnson or a Jets looking at Aaron Glenn. Unless you are a bottom feeder in the NFL, you're not going to get a hire that just wows everybody, because the teams that are bottom feeders, the teams that are losing ball games, are going to attract the best talent, the youngest talent, the hottest names in the game right now. That's not what the Hawks are going to do, because what do you have to offer? An offensive coordinator position. It's not a head coach position. So you can poke holes in it. Last year, the Saints rushed the ball 444 times, and the Hawks rushed it 383 times. I encourage everyone just to watch the film and see how Kubiak is trying to set these things up, and you might feel better about it. I feel good about it. At one point, he was the offensive coordinator with the Minnesota Vikings, had the number 3 offense in the game. 5th rushing attack, 7th passing attack. He has shown, when you look at the film, that he has a plan, and that he is he's not just shooting from the hip, and that's what I appreciate about it. So we'll wait and see. Is it a guarantee that this is going to hit and be great? No, nothing's guaranteed.
Yep.
But out of what you had, out of your options, I like this pick.
Someone said, so what's it mean for the offensive line coach? Who's that going to be? A great question from a listener. Now, right now, we don't know. But the only thing I can tell you, and I don't have the cut because obviously I'm just getting this question, so I didn't have time to look it up. But there was a late season, I think end of season press conference with Mike McDonald, in which he was asked specifically, will there be any more moves on the coaching staff? And people were really wondering about Scott Huff and some higher level coaches on that offensive staff. And he said, we're going to wait to make moves because we want whoever we bring in to be able to have a say in who he wants. So it indirectly answers your question, which is we don't know who it'll be, but we know it'll be up to Klint. So that's the answer to that one.